She poured cold water on my head. And then she followed it up by ridiculing me. "You're really lazy. I really feel sorry for my son having such a wife like you. I didn't like you from the beginning." My mother-in-law looked like a monster when she said those words to me. Why should I be treated like this? I thought, my head dripping with cold water. I'm going on a trip to Miami now. Everything should be cleared up before I come back. Yes, I'll clean it up. My mother-in-law left the living room. But in my head, I was thinking, I'll clean up the whole house. My name is Roxy. I am 29 years old and I work from home. My husband Calvin, who understands my work, travels all over the States, unlike me who stays at home all the time. His job is to write articles for a travel magazine, so he travels around the US and even overseas quite often to do interviews. I'm the opposite of this dynamic man, and so has entrusted me with his home. For the first 3 years of our marriage, I lived in a 4-bedroom house. It may seem large to one person, but I had a separate bedroom and workroom. I also have separate storage space for my documents, so this was about right for me. I also spend a lot of time alone at home, so I can concentrate on my work. However, after 3 years of living peacefully and without any major conflicts, something happened that destroyed our relationship. It all started when Calvin's father and mother divorced. The first time I met Calvin's parents was when Calvin and I went to tell my in-laws to tell them about our engagement. When my father-in-law saw me, he smiled and said, "You seem like a very kind person." My mother-in-law looked at me critically. After a while, we started talking about how Calvin and I met, and when we were planning for the wedding, the atmosphere became more relaxed. "Roxy, are you bad at doing your own makeup? Or is your face too plain to be improved? It's crazy that you didn't put any effort into meeting your in-laws." I'm flabbergasted. I did my makeup properly. Even if I did wear makeup, I thought it would be rude to wear makeup so thick that it looks flashy, so I kept it light. My mother-in-law, on the contrary, wore heavy makeup. She had thick eyelashes and purple eyeshadow. Her lipstick was bright red, and when I first saw her, I thought she looked like she was on a TV show. I wonder if my mother-in-law thought I wore as much heavy makeup as she did. I was puzzled, and my father-in-law and Calvin rushed over to me and said, "She used to be a model, you see. She has a different sense of beauty." It's true that she has a different sense of beauty than an ordinary person like me, seeing her wearing so much makeup here. I think that's why she says things about other women's makeup and appearance that are a bit off. I smiled at Calvin and told him it was okay, seeing that both he and my father-in-law were so upset at what my mother-in-law had said. Both my father-in-law and Calvin were relieved. But only my mother-in-law looked at me sternly. Then someone opened the door and walked into the living room. This person was dressed comfortably and was carrying a box with cake inside. "Joey, you're such a pain. Calvin's coming here with his bride-to-be. You know that, right? Why can't you be on time? You're a disgrace." She started scolding Joey, Calvin's brother, who came late as usual. Both Calvin and my father-in-law were trying to soothe her by saying, "Okay, come on." "Joey, you went to buy another cake for us, right? I'm so glad, thank you. I'll get the plates." And they went to the kitchen. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was saying, "Joey is really a bad boy. Even though I let him go to college, he's been a shut-in ever since. I wish I'd never had him if he was going to be such a bad child." She said it with that agitation. How can a mother say to her own son that he should not have been born? I could not believe my mother-in-law's words and actions, because my own mother had never said such a thing to me. Although it didn't bother me at first, there was only tea on the table in front of us and no sweets of any kind. Perhaps my mother-in-law asked Joey to buy a cake because she had no sweets to serve us. And since Joey had just told us that we'll be here in an hour, My mother-in-law may have lied to him about the time of her arrival. I was wondering why she was so hostile to Joey. And then she started to say more and more bad things about him. We don't need a shut-in in our house. It was really a waste of money to send him to college. If you don't get out of the house and work, the neighbors will laugh at me and your father. She was saying these words and glancing at him from the kitchen so that Joey could hear them. Damn it, I told him to get a job, but he lied and said he was working. How can he work if he doesn't leave the house for a year? I can't believe he's so stupid that he can't only tell lousy lies. I still think we shouldn't have sent him to college. Right, dear? My mother-in-law glared at my father-in-law, who was sitting next to her. You told me to send Joey to college, and that's why we had to spend extra money. I was going to send him to my relative's farmhouse after high school. My mother-in-law was getting more and more agitated, but my father-in-law was calming her down by saying, Oh, come on now. You need to calm down. It's true that Joey works at home. And here is what I realized. I think Joey is really working from home. The only person who says Joey doesn't work is my mother-in-law. If that is the case, then my mother-in-law does not understand this way of working and thinks he is a hermit because he stays at home all the time. If she is someone who doesn't understand the work from home concept, it seems a bit risky to tell her that I also work from home. I finally understood what Calvin meant when he said to me before I came into the house. Try not to talk to my mother about your work as much as possible. Calvin was worried that my mother-in-law might say something bad about me, just as she had said something about Joey. I remember well that I thought I would not say anything. Well, for the first time in 3 years of our marriage, we lived far away from my parents-in-law's house, so I didn't have much to do with my mother-in-law, and things were fine. But this time, when I received a message from Calvin, who was far away from an interview, that my mother-in-law and father-in-law had divorced, I felt an uneasiness in my heart. And my bad premonition came true when my mother-in-law came to our house the week after I received the message. Oh, this is a proper house. Calvin really is my child, unlike Joey, who is an idiot. My mother-in-law, carrying a suitcase, pushing me aside and went into the house. What's the matter, Hilda? I asked her, and she gave me a long stare. Then she said with a huff, You're still so uncouth looking, aren't you? Are you going to walk out the house dressed like that? Why don't you have a little awareness of the fact that you are my eldest son's wife? It had been 3 years since I had met my mother-in-law, and the impression I had had of her when we first met had faded considerably. So I spoke out of turn. I don't get out of the house very often, and I don't have any plans to go out today. That's why I'm wearing this outfit. My mother-in-law's eyes widened. Are you sure you are not a housewife who is just living off my son's money? No, that's not true. I tried to correct her, but her loud voice cut me off. This is the worst. I can't believe that my eldest son's wife is a lazy bum. Normally, a wife shouldn't take it easy while her mother-in-law is still alive, right? I've done my best so far. I can stay home all the time, but you can't. You're still young. You should work harder. I had no idea what my mother-in-law was talking about. Moreover, my mother-in-law did not sit on the sofa, but instead looking at every room in the house. Huh, I like this room. Now, clean this room and make it mine. It was my room. I guess it's not hard to understand why she would want to live here, since my workroom is the biggest, but I didn't think my mother-in-law would want to live with us. So I said, What? You're going to live here? And she said, Isn't it obvious? I'm divorced from my husband and I don't have a home to go back to. Then it's only natural that my eldest son should accept me, isn't it? I was so upset. I had to work today, but my mother-in-law is starting to disrupt my schedule. Anyway, I called Calvin. My mother said that? I don't know what to do. I'll be back in 3 days. So you can bear with it until then? I'll get her out when I get back. I decided to hold out for 3 days. Well, I couldn't endure those 3 days either. Hey, Roxy, you're staying in bed this late. Don't you feel embarrassed? Come on, get up. Clean up outside, hang the laundry, and make my breakfast. My mother-in-law, who is an early riser by nature, wakes up at 5 a.m. and wakes me up too. I usually go to bed around 2 a.m., so I only get 3 hours of sleep. But when I told this to my mother-in-law, "It's your fault to staying up so late, isn't it?" She's always ordering me to do everything. If she can't find what she wants to eat, she tells me to buy the food at the same time the supermarket opens. She inspects every corner of the room for cleaning, and when my mother-in-law says she wants to take a bath in the morning, she yells at me to clean it up as soon as possible. My sleepy brain wonders who this person is, but I am too sleepy to think much. My work was busy despite my lack of sleep, and my housework cut into my work time. So I had no choice but to get even less sleep in order to finish my work. But I am not a young person anymore, and after a few days of sleep deprivation, I reached my limit. And as usual, my mother-in-law urged me to finish my housework, and when I was done, I felt irresistible sleepiness. I was napping in the living room when I was suddenly doused with cold water. I didn't know what was happening to me, but I saw my mother-in-law standing in front of me and holding a bucket of cold water. "You are so lazy. I really feel sorry for my son, having such a wife like you. I didn't like you from the beginning." My mother-in-law, who was cursing me with a devilish look on her face. "I didn't like you from the beginning either," I thought to myself. She came to my house without consulting me because my father-in-law divorced her, and she started living with me on her own. Who does this woman think she is? I'm going on a trip to Miami now. Make sure you clean up before I get back. Yes, I'll clean up. My mother-in-law replied and left the living room. But in my head, I was thinking, that's right, I'll clean up the whole house. My head was strangely clear. I don't know if it was the 30 minutes of sleep or the cold water that cooled my head. But I called Calvin when I saw my mother-in-law leaving the house with her suitcase. She had gone on a trip to Miami, and when she returned to the house where Calvin and I lived, about 2 weeks later, there was a for sale sign in front of the house, and it was empty. Sure enough, I kept getting calls from her. I took one look at my mother-in-law's name on my phone and told Calvin, Joey, and my father-in-law that she called. All three of them looked at me as if to say, well, I guess that's how she would react. We're in our new house, and we'd invited Joey and my father-in-law to show it to them. Mom never learns, huh? She really doesn't understand why Dad divorced her and kicked her out of the house, does she? Calvin told me that his parents divorced for several reasons, but the main reason was that she never accepted Joey. After Calvin married me, her attitude toward Joey became even worse, and even though he said he was working at home, she often stormed into his room, interrupted with his work, and tried to throw away his work equipment. His father, who was not impressed with her behavior, decided to divorce my mother-in-law for other reasons that he could no longer overlook. When I heard that she came to our house, I warned her over the phone not to bother you, but she ignored me and bullied you. I really don't know what she is thinking. Calvin was also puzzled. After sipping my tea, I decided to answer the call from my mother-in-law despite their suggestion not to. I put my phone on speaker mode and put it on the desk. What the hell do you think you're doing? Selling my son's house? What would Calvin say? That's divorce. I say, divorce! We don't need a lazy witch like you. She started saying whatever she wanted. I didn't feel afraid of my mother-in-law, even though she said all this. She's just a person who can't do anything by herself and has nothing. She was a model, but that was decades ago. My mother-in-law became a housewife when she got married. But she didn't do much housework, and she was so lazy that her modeling career fell apart. Now she has no choice but to hide under rough skin with heavy makeup. And she was able to wear a lot of makeup because of her husband's money. In short, my divorced and unemployed mother-in-law really has nothing. The reason she was able to go on this 2-week trip was probably due to her receiving her share of the property after the divorce. However, this trip may have drained that money. The reason she was able to spend so much was probably because she thought that her eldest son Calvin would support her. Well, that is not true. Calvin answered on my behalf on the phone.
I think Roxy did the right thing, Mom.
She was supposed to be on the call with me. But when Calvin answered, my mother-in-law on the other end of the phone said,
What? Calvin?
She was so surprised, but she composed herself and said,
What are you talking about? She sold your house without your permission. I'm your mother, and I'm living there. And yet she's kicking me out. You need to leave her now.
Calvin looked at me and shrugged his shoulders, as if he knew what was wrong. I laughed at his gesture.
Mom, you thought I built a house.
But it's actually Roxy's house, which he inherited from Dad.
What? Roxy's house?
So, I have no right to it. If Roxy sells a house, I don't have a say in it. And you have no right to just move in and stay there without her permission either. You've driven her, the owner of the house, into a corner. So, there's no reason for you to stay in the house, is there?
But Roxy is a shut-in, just like Joey.
Joey and I burst out laughing.
She's still saying that.
Really, now? Joey and I laughed, and my mother-in-law said,
Wait, what is going on?
My mother-in-law started panicking on the other end of the phone.
You didn't believe for a long time, but in today's world, it's possible to work remotely from home now.
Roxy and Joey were both working from home. They're not unemployed like you. Even after all that was said, my mother-in-law did not apologize. Instead, she said,
Okay, I understand. I don't have a home. You are my eldest son, and you have to take care of me.
She probably plans to live a life of a loafer while Calvin takes care of her. Without thinking, I said, Shouldn't you reflect on your actions? I wonder who's the lazy bum here. But my mother-in-law was too stumped to argue, because it's true. Calvin also said to her,
No, I'm not going to live with someone who throws cold water on my wife. If you don't have a home, why don't you work? You said you would send Joey to work for a relative's farm instead of sending him to college. Why don't you just go yourself?
She coldly dismissed my mother-in-law.
How could my mother, who had been so absurd in going to nightclubs that she neglected my father, Joey, and me, and had nothing to take care of the house, say such things? You're nothing to me, and I'm not going to have anything to do with you, so I'm cutting you off.
He told her, and hung up the phone. Soon after, I blocked her and bought a new phone. My father-in-law, Joey, and Calvin all bought new phones together. So I think it's safe to say that our relationship with my ex-mother-in-law is now completely cut off. After my father-in-law divorced her, he sold the house and moved into an apartment with Joey, so he doesn't have to worry about her. She doesn't know where our new place is either, so there's no need to worry about her storming into our place. Later, Calvin told her through a relative that when she realized that she could not rely on Calvin, she tried to find out where we were. However, my ex-mother-in-law did not know where Calvin worked, so she was unable to storm into his office either. I guess it did not matter to my mother-in-law where her son worked, because all that mattered to her that he went out and earned money. Finally, she went to a relative's farm to live and work, as Calvin had told her to do. However, the habit of laziness that has become ingrained in her over the years has not been easily cured. And so people around her scold her every day and make her cry. As for us, we're talking about having a child soon. Well,
I won't say anything to my ex-mother-in-law about when I give birth to our child.